Hello, everybody. It's Jodie Thornton here, and welcome. I am just going to share my screen so that you can see my slides, and they haven't got into present mode, so we'll just pop them into present mode. And it's so good to see you all. I am going to turn my video off so that we can just focus on the slides. So this evening's topic is gentle parenting in reality, which is a really important topic for me. I think that I see so much in the way of gentle parenting advice that actually makes things harder than it needs to be. And I'm really passionate about making sure that everybody knows that we can all do this, no matter if we don't have the privileges that other people might have or that are assumed in a lot of the advice that you see around. So I want to start with an acknowledgement of country. So I am coming to you from Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, which you may know as Canberra, Australia. And if you're not from Australia, you might not know that in our nation, the sovereignty was never ceded on all of these lands. And so we like to do an acknowledgement of country to recognise that this is, basically that these are stolen lands. And so I acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples as the custodian of the lands, waterways and skies on Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, which is where I'm coming to you from today. I pay respect to the past and present Ngunnawal and Ngambri elders. And I'd really like to encourage any of you, and particularly anyone who's coming, who's listening from Australia, to check out the World of Children's Ground. Their website is childrensground.org.au. Their work is really about trying to make sure that the more First Nations children in Australia actually have access to early learning in their own language. So culturally appropriate and in their own language is really important work. And if you're in Australia, I'd really appreciate you just considering making a donation, because this is part of the work. I think we've all seen the memes that go around saying, if you steal somebody's drink bottle and then just acknowledge that it's their drink bottle and continue to drink from it, there's a certain limitation to how far that goes in terms of recognizing the damage that has been done. And so if this is something that you feel strongly about too, that might be a way for you to also contribute to the reparation of the damage that has been done locally. So about me, my name is Jodie Thornton, and I have 4 children who are 24, 21, 9 and 7. I also have one granddaughter who's 18 months old, and she is hilarious and just getting to that real first toddler stage where things start to get a little bit tricky. And we have a blended family. So my 24 and 21-year-olds are my husband's children from his first marriage, and I met them when they were 5 and 8, and we have 2 together who are 9 and 7. For me, I am unlearning over responsibility. I think there's a whole host of things that we all learn, in the culture that we have, and also, from our own childhood and our own families of origin. But for me, one of the big things that I struggle with is that if I see a problem, I immediately think that I must take ownership of this problem and figure out how to resolve it, no matter how many other things I've already taken on. And so that's one of the big things that I'm really working on, is trying to recognize that not every problem is critically urgent. And even if it is, not every problem is mine to solve in the world. And I'd do better focusing on the things that are most important one at a time. So today we are going to be focusing on unpacking the assumptions that make gentle parenting harder than it needs to be. And I'm going to bring in a different approach that makes it achievable to be a gentle parent no matter what. And I really mean that. I know that there's a lot of discussion about how much privilege it takes to be a gentle parent, or that you need to have been raised with emotional awareness or regulation or all these things. And I think that there's a reason that we really don't need things to be as hard as they're made out to be with gentle parenting. There is a way for us to get there over time, and for things to get easier more quickly. And I want to talk about how we get there tonight. So I first want to ask, what is your biggest challenge in being a gentle parent? Because this can be different for different people. And even if you have similar circumstances, some things can not be an obstacle for some families and can be an obstacle in others. So I just want to take a moment for us to think about, what is your individual challenge in being a gentle parent? The most common challenges that I hear are my partner isn't on the same page. I don't have the time that gentle parenting takes. My triggers get in the way of doing it in the moment. So like I know what to do, but when it comes to in the moment, I just don't do it. Or I gentle parent, but my child doesn't gentle child, right? We all have seen or know somebody who does that if it's not ourselves. And as we talk about this, I just want to mention that I'm going to bring up a whole bunch of different things tonight where part of it may be pushing on some buttons of long held assumptions that we have internalized from either just our own experiences or maybe from gentle parenting advice more broadly. And I'm also going to be touching on different ways of looking at things. And I think I just wanted to mention that it can actually be really hard to hear that what you've been doing wasn't the best approach. And I remember this happened to me once I went to a parenting course and they were teaching us a specific set of skills that I had not had prior to doing this course. And at one stage in the course, I just really teared up and I was very obviously emotional. And I mentioned that this really upsets me because I can see what would have been different for me. And at that particular time, it was one of our children in particular. I can see how much different it would have been for me and for them if I knew how to do this already. And I'm feeling really sad about that. And the response I got was, "Don't worry, eventually kids come back around." And I just felt like that was just so invalidating for me because I really did feel a loss and a grieving for the time that I had lost. And I just want to say that if that comes up for you, it's normal. And not it doesn't happen for everybody, but it does happen. And you don't need to invalidate yourself or say it's fine. But you also don't need to, like, if you are comfortable that we're always just learning what we're learning, that's also normal too. So basically, I just want to say, let's be gentle with ourselves. And then the second thing I wanted to mention is that it is never too late. So today, most of the examples I'm going to use are going to be with small children because I find that people are most focused on gentle parenting when the kids are little. But all of what we talk about today is applicable if your children are primary school age, if they are teenagers, if they are young adults, and if they have children of their own. I have used these principles with clients who have children that are older than me, and it's never too late. So I just want to say, we don't need to, whilst there can be a grieving and a sense of loss for time lost, I also want to say that wherever you're up to now, we can get through that. So if you have any questions that are specific to older children and examples of how this might look like for older children, please do reach out because I'm more than happy to discuss how these principles can be applied at older age groups if it's not clear. So the first assumption that I want to talk about is that we need to accept and withstand our feelings. This comes through when we talk about sharing our calm, right? It's basically we should be calm and just be okay with our children while their feelings are out of control. It comes up when we talk about a lot of emotional awareness resources for children. We'll talk about making children understand that feelings pass. It will be okay. If you just wait it out, feelings will pass, right? And this is not true. It's not true at all. And I'll give you a very specific example, which is the mental load. And this is a really common topic of conversation in the parenting world because obviously definitely in heterosexual relationships, it tends to be that the woman carries the mental load or the bulk of the mental load and the man does not. And that's, something that's embedded in our culture. And obviously there are some couples in which the gender roles are reversed. And obviously this also applies for couples who are either not cis, couples who are not cishet. It also applies there too. But often we have a disproportionate burden of the mental load. So this is not, we're teamwork, but one of us does more on the mental load and one of us does more on something else. This is like a disproportionate load on one partner. Now, if this was you, how would you feel if you were very upset because you have such additional workload on yourself that you are left to deal with this all on your own. And it's really impacting your quality of life. It's impacting how you see your partner. It's impacting your relationship. And you're very upset. And it does not matter whether you articulate this very well or whether you are just, maybe triggered and expressing yourself in a very, big and loud way. Can you imagine if your partner said to you, honey, I can see you're so stressed with all these tasks and facts that you have to hold in your head. Of course you're upset. I would be upset if that was happening to me too. You can be upset about this as much as you like and for as long as you like. And I'll be right here. Your feelings are valid. Your feelings aren't too big for me. You'll notice that these are all phrases that come from gentle parenting recommendations for how we handle our children's big feelings. Now, you'll notice as well that I did pop in a little condescension kind of tone, because I think that quite a lot of the way we're told to respond to our children's feelings is actually condescending. And notice how, for some people who are carrying the mental load, hearing that validation and that like being seen and being heard would be such a relief compared to what they experience, right? That would actually be a productive step forward. However, if you are not so desperate to be seen and heard because you're not getting that as a rule in your relationship, hearing these statements does nothing to help you, right? All that is doing is saying, like, of course, like, it's going to be okay. These feelings will pass. It'll be all right. You'll get there. And of course you feel like this. We're not meant to withstand our feelings. Our feelings are telling us either that our needs are being met or they're not. And in this case, the feelings that this partner has about carrying the burden of the mental load are telling them that there's something wrong in their relationship. And this is also a really good example, because carrying the burden of the mental load would be different for different people in different relationships. So the need might be, I need to feel like we are a team, that my needs matter to you. It might be, I have ADHD and so I get overwhelmed. And so this is taking up all of my time and it's very stressful because I'm having to do tasks that are not easy for me. I have to do all of them and I'm making mistakes because of the ADHD tax, right? That's a different need to, I need to feel like we're a team and that I matter to you. What I need matters to you. A different need again might be, I'm just overstimulated and I just need more time to rest, and the mental load is getting in the way of me getting time to rest. Like, you see how even an example that so many people can relate to, it's not necessarily just like the feelings are valid. There's a different need underneath of that. And unless and until our partner understands and helps us in solving the problem, we don't actually get that much of a benefit from being validated. We're not looking to withstand the feelings. We're looking to address the feelings. We're looking to address the root cause of what's going on. And so if we think about this, I think I've covered this because I get quite ranty about it, but our feelings tell us about our needs. So positive feelings, the ones that we call positive, are the ones that tell us our needs are being met. And the feelings we call negative are the ones that tell us that our needs aren't being met. And so actually, our emotional awareness around positive feelings is what helps us, like really being attuned to our own positive feelings, helps us to understand more of who we are, helps us to make decisions that are more aligned for us as individuals rather than like doing what we should do or what we should be happy with. And getting attuned to our negative feelings helps us to understand, what is it that we need? Why are we upset? And so that's not just helpful for us as adults. Obviously, it's helpful for us as kids. And so if we think about our children, you can have the same tantrum about the color of the cup. It can be about, I feel like I don't matter because the baby gets whatever the baby wants as soon as the baby needs it. And I, as a toddler, don't get that. I don't feel like I matter. Different tantrum to, I really like my place setting to be very aesthetic, and I want my plate to match my cup because aesthetics are very important to me. Right. And so you can see how when we focus on the gentle parenting approach of, I can see you want the pink cup, but I can't give it to you, we miss the point. We absolutely miss the point, and we miss the opportunity to solve the problem. And so if we stop trying to be okay with the feelings and wait for them to pass like the weather as if we have no control, we can start identifying the root cause of the problem and finding solutions that work, not just for our kids as individuals, but moment to moment. They can see how if you've got those two tantrums about the color of the car, like if you day one, the tantrum is about the baby gets everything the baby wants and I don't get what I want. I am always told that what I need is not that important. And then day two, the tantrum starts with the cup, and you go in, you sweep in to be like, you matter, what's important to you matters. Of course, I would give you the cup if I could. And it's a totally different problem. Now, if let's say the plate has pink and teal on it, and the solution is, well, there's also a teal cup, we miss the opportunity if we've focused on what the tantrum was about yesterday. Because we go in with, you need the pink cup because it's important for you to get what you ask for because you matter, versus actually you want your place setting to look just so. And so, you actually want something that matches, and it doesn't have to be the pink one, right? So that's where, like, obviously this is a very big approach, right? Solving the root cause of the problem day to day. It's a big approach, but it doesn't stay big. It can become autopilot. It can become easy. And in order to get there, we've got a whole bunch of skills here. So in order to get to the root cause of the problem, first, if our children are overwhelmed, we need to be able to actively help them to regulate. So not just share our calm, which I am always thinking, what calm? I don't always have calm when my child is overwhelmed. But not just to wait for the overwhelm to pass, not just to be the strong container to help your child or to allow your child to experience the full suite of feelings or the full extent of the feelings, but actively assist them to regulate when they're overwhelmed. That is a skill you can learn. The next skill is identifying and validating their feelings, right? Helping them to notice, I have this feeling and I'm going to speak up about it, rather than I have this feeling and I'm going to push my brother's tower over that he spent hours building because I haven't noticed that I have a feeling or a need. I just have an impulse to destroy his work. Like, no, helping our children to identify and validate their feelings is a skill you can learn. Then we want to use the feeling to identify the need. Why do they have the impulse to knock over the tower? Is it because they want their brother to play with them the way they want to play? Is it because they're not allowed to touch the tower materials? There's all of these real needs underneath of the impulse. And that's a skill, right? That's a skill for you to learn how to, in the moment, help your child identify why are they feeling the way they feel. And then it's a skill to efficiently find a way to meet the need that works for everyone. And so this is one of the things that if you look at a lot of the posts around gentle parenting, there's a lot of comments about how it is draining to be a gentle parent. And there's a few different reasons. We're going to cover all of them today. But one of the big reasons that it feels draining to be a gentle parent is because for people, if you haven't yet figured out what the actual need is, you're just doing what they ask for as often as you can. And that may not be something that works for you. You're just doing it because that you know that they want it. And then secondly, if you are getting to the root cause of the need, if you don't know what you need and your focus is on just getting them what they need to the exclusion of what you need, it is exhausting. And so then we will want to get to a place where we can efficiently find a way to meet our kids' needs that works for everyone else that's involved. So it may be siblings, it may be us, it may be our partner, it could be whoever else is involved in the situation. We want to find a way to meet that need. And again, that's something that in the beginning feels like a big job, but over time you get so quick at it. And then, so long term, what we want is for our children to use these skills independently. Long term, we want our children to be able to regulate their emotions even when you're not there. Right? We want our children to be able to identify their feelings and deeply believe their feelings are valid no matter what anyone says. Whether it's your feelings averse partner who makes out as though feelings are just over the top and unnecessary, whether it is someone at the school who doesn't appreciate your child's personality and how they express their feelings, whatever the issue is, if your children can learn to identify and deeply believe their own feelings, that they are valid and not have to engage in what anyone else says. And that's something that they can learn, like I say, the long term, but we basically, our job is to set the scene so that they can learn it, and they can learn that at a very young age. So then the next one is identifying their needs and articulating them to others. And this is a really important one if you have a feelings averse partner. Because if your child is able to say, I'm feeling sad because you get more excited when you see the baby, that will come across very differently to a feelings averse partner than you don't even care about me, or they choose you as the preferred parent, or they do behaviors that would be called acting up whenever your partner's around, right? Those are all like feelings. And so what we do, the partner who's involved in gentle parenting, we try to look for like what might be the cause of that feeling. And feelings averse partner will be looking at the surface level behavior and determining whether that's acceptable or not. But if your child can say, I don't feel like you care about me because when you come home and you see the baby, your face lights up. And when you see me, you tell me that I've left my bag out. And children can say these things very, very young, very, very young. The last one here is finding a way to meet the need that works for everyone. And so your children, this is a story I always tell, and I'll tell the short version because we've got other things to talk about. But when my now 9-year-old was 2.5, she was banging something really loud. And on that day, I just needed it to stop because I just could not deal with the noise. And I said to her, Alyssa, can you please stop the banging? And I didn't, that's not exactly the script I would give somebody to follow, but I just expressed, this is what I would like. I would like you to stop the banging. And she's at 2.5, when I had been using these strategies with her consistently enough, she said to me, no, mummy, I like to bang, you get headphones. The child was 2.5 and she solved the problem better than I had. Like, they are capable of doing this, right? And you can see how if we didn't have those skills embedded in her, she might have been upset that I asked her to stop what she was doing. She might not have been able to figure out that actually it was a viable alternative for me to get headphones, because what I wanted was peace. It wasn't quiet. So for me, I don't remember what I listened to, but it might have been heavy metal. Like, I didn't need quiet, I needed peace. And I could get that with headphones. And she made a suggestion that worked for both of us. And so that's what we want to be doing, is really looking at solving the root cause of the problem, using these skills. At first, we lead and they follow. And then over time, we want them to be able to lead, not just when we're on imperfect days, but also when we're not there, and when they're older and independent. So assumption number 2, our children learn from modeling. Now, our children have their own impulses. Like, they're not always looking to someone else to tell them what is the appropriate thing to do. Our kids' feelings and behaviors are a reflection of their needs. So even if your child could learn from modeling, which I mean, surely everybody's seen the memes where they say if you model, our children will do it, but I clean and they do not clean. Like, that's a perfect example, right? Even if they could learn from modeling, they would learn how to meet your needs, not theirs. Right? They would learn that when you get home at the end of the day, the first thing you do is cook the dinner, and then you make sure the tasse is entirely spotless, and then you sit down and have a rest, right? That may be the way that you run your evenings. They'll learn that that's the way, but rather than figure out, is that what they want and they need? So they'd learn, if your children learn exclusively from modeling, and obviously we're not talking exclusively, but, basically when we say our children learn from modeling, it's like you can't ever be different to them. You can't ever have a different opinion or a different feeling or need or values even. And secondly, we're basically saying, don't worry about what you want. Focus on doing what I would do in that moment. And that's not what we want. So if instead you were doing what we were just talking about, if you're solving the root cause of the problem, you don't need to model anything. Because if you're always focused on solving the root cause of the problem, like we're getting to the problem, like we're defining moment to moment, why do we want them to do what we're modeling to them? What is in the way of them being able to do it and then doing it? Like we don't need to be modeling, nor do I think it's an effective, I mean, obviously it has some uses, modeling has some uses, but it has a lot of places where people overuse it or over rely on it. So assumption number 3, our children need consistent messages to learn. And you see this when people say you and your partner need to be on the same page. When you say that if the grandparents are not gentle parenting, you should educate them. You see this when they say you need to be consistent within yourself. You need to always follow the script. You need to always remember what you need to say in that moment and say the same thing all the time. Now, being on the same page or being consistent or educating everyone to do exactly what you expect them to do, all that does is train our children that they won't get what they need, so don't bother trying. Right? Because if you imagine, right? So if I have a different view to my partner on something that needs to happen, if we say you can't ever say something different, if one of us goes ahead and says something different, what then does that say? It says to the kids, there is a weakness here. You can exploit it for what? To get what you need. So if we're saying, no, there's no weakness here, there's no weak link, we are tight and strong on this, all it says is what you need is not being, what you need, getting to a place where you feel comfortable that you're getting what you need is not important here, right? That's not what we want. We want to be solving the root cause of the problem. And so if your parenting focuses on solving the root cause of the problem, it does not matter what anyone else is doing, right? And so we see this. So in my household, so my husband and I have lots of things that are different, our views on things. And so when I'm focused on, we're just solving the root cause of the problem, it's like, well, if daddy's home and daddy needs it to be quiet, or daddy's home and daddy needs this, we're just trying to solve the root cause of the problem that works for everybody, right? We just need, when daddy's home, we're considerate of what he needs. When daddy's not home, we don't need to consider what he needs because it's not relevant, right? That's all we're doing. So it doesn't matter if we have different views. And you see how that also allows space for each parent to have their own needs. Because what happens when you say get on the same page? Invariably, you wouldn't have to say get on the same page if someone wasn't on the same page. And so then the person who has to get off of their page and onto the other person's page, they're not getting their needs met. For whatever reason, they're not getting their needs met. And it's not necessary. We don't have to do that. We can find a solution to the problem that works for everybody. So assumption number 4, one of my favorites, kids need limits, to which I say arbitrary limits are counterproductive. So if your child learns that if there's a limit, you should respect it, and that limit is arbitrary, right? Then they get told, or even appears arbitrary, even if it's not arbitrary, but it appears arbitrary, then the message they take in is don't question the rules. The rules are the rules. Now, if we think about all the things that need to change in our culture, how are we going to change any of those without changing the rules? Right? How are we going to get equal pay for all the genders? How are we going to get true respect, like not just protection, but true respect for all the genders? Like, how are we going to get any of these things to change if we don't question the rules, right? So, like, getting children need to respect limits is just so counterproductive, because if you're successful, then they're going to be more likely to acquiesce what's important to them as soon as someone says that they should, right? But in most cases, or I shouldn't say most cases, it's not necessarily most. In the cases of the children who are strong-willed, you're not actually going to win. What you're going to do is teach your child to find a way to get around the rule, as opposed to actually respect the rule, right? And then the last thing that teaches kids is that there is a right boundary in any given moment. So, like, if you say the limit, this is one, a lot of parents will have differing views on how loud it is appropriate to be inside. Now, what is the right volume for inside? There isn't one. The right volume for inside is the volume that allows everybody that's in the room to be physically comfortable, right? Like, we don't need to have this situation. And even then, I would argue, like, if, let's say, the children want to be loud in the lounge room, if the adult that needs peace and quiet, or can they use headphones, as my two-year-old suggested? But also, is that adult who is not comfortable with the volume level, can they go and do something else for a while people are being loud, right? And so you can see how it actually doesn't teach people to respect other people's boundaries. It teaches you, don't question the rules, acquiesce if someone says that they should, and also that there are right and wrong boundaries, and you should not respect people don't respect a limit if people have set a wrong limit. All right. What we actually want to teach is solving the root cause of the problems. So instead of, like, we need limits, we set temporary boundaries. And the reason they're temporary is because we use them when and only when we can't solve the root cause of the problem in a way that works for everyone. So if we can't, say, for example, your child is desperate to wear a particular shirt, but that shirt is in the wash, and in that moment, you do not have the time or the emotional space to be able to help them get regulated, because they're extremely upset that their shirt's not available, to get regulated, to identify why it is that they need that shirt, and then figure out a solution to the actual problem. If you do not have the time and emotional energy, then you can say, we cannot solve this right now. I'm really sorry, but I can't get your shirt out of the washing machine. It is going right now, and I cannot open the washing machine for it to come out. We're going to need to choose another shirt, and we need to do it quickly because we need to leave the house in order to be on time. Now, I use a lot of words. You don't have to use that many words, but you see how I'm explaining right at this moment, we can't solve this problem in a way that works for everyone. And so we're just doing the best that we can, right? That's all we're doing. And you see how that's not arbitrary, right? It's not arbitrary. I'm just explaining the facts of the situation as this, and I'm holding a boundary around that. And so to implement healthy boundaries, the skills that we need are implementing boundaries before we're at our wits' end so we can do it well. So that means doing it not because, like, I see a lot of gentle parents will do their absolute best to make it work with their child. And by the time they get to the point, the only reason that they will stop trying to make it work in their child's favor is when they have run out of time or space. And then they lose their cool, and that's when they actually hold a limit. And so that being the case, we can't hold the boundary well because we're already dysregulated ourselves. We want to be implementing boundaries before we're at our wits' end so we can do it well. When we implement boundaries, we're validating everyone's needs. So everyone involved, you, your child, anyone else involved, the needs are all valid. It's just that the strategy, so you'll see a lot of parenting advice is like, explaining to children that what they want is not a need, or what they're asking for is unrealistic. That's all at the top, at the solution level, but all our children are doing is suggesting a solution that they think will work for them. you know, if we believe that that won't work either for them, you know, for example, I want to have ice cream for dinner every night. Well, if you, and I don't mean to cast aspersions for anyone who does allow their child to have ice cream for dinner every night, many people would say that ice cream for dinner every night would not be in their child's interest for a number of health reasons, right? So they'll get their need for what may be fun, maybe like their senses being stimulated, like all sorts of things that it would meet that wouldn't meet their health needs, right? So we're validating that you want something that's exciting or you want something that makes your tongue be tingly, but we also need to find a way to keep you healthy. When we recognize in the way we implement the boundaries, we recognize that we can't solve the problem right now and why. So we give the explanation, right? Really explain it. So not, I know it's hard for you, you know, like there's really fluffy, big blanket statements that don't get to the root of the thing, is that you want this and I want that, and right at this moment we can't solve it. And so we're choosing the best available option. We also want to hold skillful boundaries. We want to hold space for our kids' feelings about the boundary. Like that's a skill in and of itself. And that is part of helping children to learn to accept other people's boundaries and to be comfortable with other people's boundaries. That skill of like, how do I hold space for the feelings that I have, basically about the best available solution does not work for me right now. Like that's the issue that we're really solving there. And then when we do this, our kids learn to independently notice when they need to set a boundary and enforce it. Notice when someone else has or would like to set a boundary and respect it. Accepting other people's boundaries, whether they agree with them or not, like, because we come back to that thing of like, what's the right level of volume in a house? Well, it depends on the people in the house, you know? And so when someone else has a boundary, it's not up to us to decide whether that's the boundary or not. Ultimately, the boundary is temporary while we haven't solved the problem in a way that works for everyone. So this is what we learn. And so then, you know, you can see how it's a heck of a lot easier to start questioning rules and figuring out solutions to the problems that we don't want our children to acquiesce to in the bigger picture in our culture. So assumption number 5 is that our triggers are permanent and or they need therapy to be dealt with. And this is one where you hear this talked spoken a lot about when we talk about how hard gentle parenting is. But ultimately, our triggers come up when we feel unsafe. Now, there are obviously those triggers that, so for example, you have a trigger that comes up when somebody whistles. Obviously, that's an association with a noise or something like that. But the most common parenting triggers for most people is actually that we do not know how to solve the problem in front of us. And because it is important for us, so either we're exhausted and we feel like everything needs to be solved, or we're not exhausted, we just feel like this is a really important job for us. We want to do it well, right? And so then that being the case, when it's not going well, especially if our child is in distress, then that's where our nervous system goes looking for, how could I solve this? Like, what has come up in the past that would be just like this? And it will go looking for the situation, and what will come up is like, this is just like when you were 5 and you didn't matter, or this is just when you were 5, just like when you were 5, and there is no way for you to ever be good enough, right? There's all of these triggers that we have. But even if you heal your most common triggers, so go to therapy and heal them, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, I'm just saying, even if you heal your most common triggers, the next time a problem comes up that can't be solved, your nervous system will do the same thing. It will go back and it'll find other triggers that will come up, because it'll be like, this is a problem that's unsolved, just like that problem that's unsolved. Or if you heal them all, a new trigger can be created. I wrote will on the slide, and I think that should be can. A new trigger can be created, because if you have a repetitively stressful situation where you don't know how to handle the feelings you have about this not working, and parenting is so important to us, you can create new triggers from these experiences. And so instead of looking at like, let's have no triggers or let's heal all of our triggers, which again, I'm not saying people shouldn't, if that is the next best step for you, by all means, go ahead and do it. But if our approach is literally solve the problem or skillfully hold a boundary, you won't feel unsafe. Like your nervous system will not experience this as problematic because your nervous system, and this is the caveat I have there, is that when you have enough practice, because if you haven't had enough practice, solving the problem can still be triggering because you can feel like I'm not going to be able to do this in a way that works, or we're not going to be able to solve it, or my child, it's something that happens. It does happen for me. This one is if I'm not able to figure out what is the underlying need for my child. It happens less and less over the years, but it still does come up. If I can't figure out the underlying need for my child, I will get a bit of a, you're just not telling me because you would rather, like, you don't care whether we solve this or not. You just are focused on what matters to you, right? It's like, I don't matter. So this one still obviously hasn't been healed in me. But like, once you have enough practice that you can trust that you have a good chance that you'll be able to solve the problem, or that you can skillfully hold a boundary and that will be okay for your kids. Once you get to that point, you don't have to be perfect, but you've got enough trust in yourself and how you'll handle it. Then if you're only ever trying to solve the problem if you can, and if you can't, holding a boundary, then it's not unsafe, right? It doesn't feel unsafe, so the triggers don't come up, or far less often. So the skills required for this, we want to prevent triggers from coming up as often by solving the problem or implementing healthy boundaries, or holding space for your kids' feelings about the boundary, right? If we do those things well, then the triggers are less likely to come up. And sometimes we still will find the triggers come up. And if that still happens, we can disconnect the trigger. What I mean by that is that if I can talk you through what is the trigger that's coming up. So let's use that never going to be good enough for you trigger, right? If I can help you to recognize that in this situation, your child not being comforted by your attempts to help them to regulate their feelings, if you can see that this is not actually a case of you not being good enough, if we can demonstrate that really clearly, so I take you through a process of really recognizing this is not what's happening here, then that trigger still exists. Like, I'm never going to be good enough. That trigger will still sit in you, and it will come up at times where your nervous system thinks this is what's relevant to the situation, but it won't come up when your child's attention won't calm down because you have disconnected it from that stimulus. The second way is to find a way to prevent that circumstance that brings up the trigger. So, for example, if actually, it's a good one. If we had a situation where you were, it was very, very difficult for you to have an extended period of time holding space for your child's tantrums, then I would be looking at really refining your space holding skills so that the tantrums don't last as long. And also, I'd be looking at how do we get the emotional awareness for your child so that they are less likely to get overwhelmed in the first place. And if we do both of those two things, you're less likely to have a tantrum come up that goes for an extended period of time, so the trigger doesn't come up. And then I left off a dot point, I'll have to amend this slide, that you can actually heal the trigger, right? And sometimes that can be done through a coach like me. So I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist. Sometimes we can actually heal triggers through coaching, and other times you will actually need therapy, and you don't need to focus on the therapy if you don't need to, because if we just focus on boundaries, right? If we focus on improving your skills on solving the problem, and if you can't, implementing healthy boundaries, then you don't need to worry about healing the trigger if it's not the right time for you. And sometimes we don't want to unlock, sometimes we instinctively know that there's going to be a process that is just not the right one for us and where our lives are at this moment. Assumption number 6, gentle parenting is inherently hard, right? And you can hear the tone of my voice, right? Now, I want to know, knowing what I've said tonight, can you see why it seems like gentle parenting is inherently hard, and that if you had the skills, it wouldn't be? Like, if you had the skills that I went through for each of those assumptions, if you had those skills, it just actually wouldn't be difficult. What would be difficult is if we expect ourselves to be able to learn and implement a set of skills overnight. What would be difficult is remembering to recite the perfect script in the moment from the outside, so like to perform the act of perfect gentle parenting on the outside, while on the inside, not being able to regulate our own emotions, or not being able to get to the root cause of what's going on for our children. Those things are difficult. But if you have the skills that gentle parenting can be built on, it's actually really easy. And I say that unironically, right? I think now my gentle parenting is not perfect. I still have ways to go. But I am at a point now where the pieces that I still need to refine and learn and make them like autopilot, so I don't have to stop and think about it, those things happen so much less frequently because I've got all the things that come up most commonly in my day-to-day parenting. They are working like clockwork because I've been doing this process of learning and growing over time. And now, like, there's this tipping point that comes when it's no longer about I'm not doing this the perfect way, when it's about, am I trying to solve the problem? Yes or no? If I can't, am I implementing a boundary? And over time, it just gets easier and easier. Your child will be dysregulated less often and less intensely and for less time. Your child will be more able to articulate what the real issue is, rather than, you spending weeks looking at, like, why is this behavior happening? Why does it continue to happen? Now I'm triggered by it because I know it's going to keep happening every time this, that, and the other happens. Like, all of these things just get easier and easier when you have the skills and you can use them like in an easy way. And so, with all of that being said, it can get easier every 2 weeks. And I say that intentionally, like 2 weeks, if you are using a strategy and you're not getting a shift within 2 weeks, there's something off, right? So either we're not focusing on the next right thing, there might be something else in the way that needs to be handled first. It might be that the technique you're using, the way you're using that skill with your child isn't resonating for your child. You need to tweak it. And it won't necessarily be solved. I'm not saying that in 2 weeks you can solve every parenting problem you've got, or each parenting problem can be solved in 2 weeks, but you will see a productive shift, And so a good example is sometimes I'll have families where one sibling has very intense emotions. So you might have a strong-willed child or a child that's highly sensitive, and they have a lot of big feelings all the time. When we get to a certain point, that child's emotions are regulated often enough that a sibling actually starts piping up because they realize that there's space for their feelings now. And so when I say productive shift, it's not necessarily like, less to do, but it gets easier because now you know that your second child is not acquiescing their feelings or pushing their feelings down because all the space is being taken up by the louder child, the child who's more expressive. So if you would like to do this together, let's do it. So I have a course, Confident Connected Parenting, and in that course, you can learn all the skills you need to be a gentle parent consistently. But all the skills we talked about tonight, they're all covered, and they're covered in such a way that you only spend as much time as you need on each one. We're not spending any more time than you need to, but really just going through and going, we want to make sure that this is working, this is working, and this is working, and then we see what you need. You will also learn in this course the skills to teach your child how to use these skills independently. That's a clumsy sentence, but you know what I mean. You need to have the skills to help your child use these skills independently. That you will learn in this course as well. And so how this course works is we have pre-recorded video modules, and you can jump in and consume those as quickly or as slowly as you would like to. And you have ongoing access. So you don't need to worry about if life happens. You don't need to worry about, if there's sickness or Christmas or whatever's going on that might get in the way. You can always come back to the video modules. And because we know we need to be seeing shifts every 2 weeks, or else there's something off that needs to be tweaked, we have 2 live calls in the course every month. So you have a chance to jump on a video call in a group setting and ask your specific question, to say, like, I tried this and I know I was expecting this to happen, but this is how my child reacted. Or I tried this and I just cannot figure out what is the need underlying this. These are all the clues I have. What ideas do you have, right? So there's all of this space for you to get personalized advice on what needs to shift for this to work for you and your children as individuals. So for this course, it's ongoing access as long as the program exists. So I have no intention of retiring ever. But if I was to wind this program up, I would give you 12 months notice, and you would have access to download all the modules and be able to still use them in your own time. But you would have 12 months of those 2 calls a month to come and ask your questions. And for that ongoing access, you have one payment of 495 Australian dollars or 12 monthly payments of $50. And you can jump in and grab that at jodiefortton.com/confident connected parenting. And tonight, I want to say, for this webinar, I would like to say, let's get you started. So I'd like to say, let's book a free session. And in 45 minutes, what we can do is identify what is your next right step to focus on, or what is the thing that's going to make a good shift for you next. And we'll figure out a realistic way for you to get that productive shift in the next 2 weeks. And so if you'd like to take me up on that one, I'd love to see you all book in. It would be great. If you'd like to take me up on that one, you can email me, jodie@jodiefortton.com, and we'll find a time that works for both of us, and get you started so that you can get that productive shift. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to email me, and I will speak to you then.